Welcome to the Growth Shift. I'm David Zilstra. Here's what I've learned after years in business. Every leader who's built something meaningful has a story, but the moment they had to shift, when failure forced innovation, when change became opportunity, when they chose growth over comfort. On this show, we dive into those pivotal moments, the setbacks that became breakthroughs, the strategic shifts that accelerated growth, and the frameworks that turned obstacles into opportunities. Because here's the truth. In a world where change is the only constant, the leaders who thrive aren't the ones who avoid failure. They're the ones who've learned to shift strategically through it. So whether you're facing your own pivot point or just want to learn from someone who's been there, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. This episode is brought to you by Valentix. At Valentix, we work with B2B coaches and consultants who are struggling with generating consistent, high-quality leads, automating their client onboarding processes, and scaling their operations without simply adding more hours or headcount. Most of the time, our clients come to us frustrated because they are bogged down in manual tasks and feel like they're missing out on the power of modern technology. But with the right strategy and AI-powered solutions, they're able to streamline their workflows, attract better opportunities, and achieve sustainable growth. If that sounds like you or someone you know, learn more at valentix.io. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Today on The Growth Shift, we're honored to host Bryan Setser, a true wayfinder and pioneer in digital transformation. Bryan has an incredible track record from scaling North Carolina virtual, 50,000 students across 12 states and 2 countries, to founding Setser Group, a firm dedicated to navigating the future of learning and work. His insights into disruptive models and the strategic implementation of AI are truly invaluable. Bryan, welcome to the Growth Shift.
Great to be with you, David.
Now, Bryan, you've described yourself as a sort of wayfinder who's always been early into disruptive models. Can you elaborate on your journey and what experiences led you to embrace this role, particularly in innovation?
You bet. Well, I think wayfinders are inherently curious. I was raised by educator parents, surrounded with lots of things to read, and was always put into environments where someone needed to be led, whether it was sports teams or the student council or, community organizations. I've always been that person who kind of asked the question, can I help these people? Can I help these students? Can I help these educators or these community members? So it was natural for me to get into wayfinding because a lot of people face challenges in life, or they're misinformed, or they don't quite understand what the opportunities are. And I've always been blessed to be around leaders and teammates who certainly shaped those wayfinding abilities and gave me a lot of insight into how to help people walk through complexity or volatility and come out on the other side. And so my journey as an educator has always been at the intersection of digital transformation or, design thinking or building programs and products and services. And there's a lot of people when you're in that seat that will throw up barriers or obstacles or say it can't be done. And I've always been curious about how to actually find a way through it.
So, Bryan, quick question for you here. You mentioned you're a wayfinder who naturally found himself in leadership roles, whether it was student council or anything else along the way. Many people find themselves in that position as a natural leader, but you often get to a point where those natural talents, abilities, or instincts, don't make up for a lack of experience, right? Just because you're a good leader with people doesn't necessarily you're a great leader when it comes to a team and leading an organ. Do you have any small or memorable lessons that you learned along the way that really started to show you that you needed to start making more shifts and changes to grow into the leader that you are today?
Great question, and I'll give you 3. You have to be a voracious learner. I don't go into any kind of complex problem solving thinking that I have the expertise or all of the needed skill sets to solve it. So you have to be really intentional around learning an industry, learning what customers are saying, learning what problems people are trying to solve or aspirations they may have. So that's lesson 1, be a voracious learner. The second piece is, be someone who collects expertise, collects people to solve a problem. We have a lot of people that when you put 5 or 6 people in a room, or you get some people that think differently than you do, that natural friction and those questions and that skepticism can be equally valuable to people who are focused on opportunity or mobility or what the latest trend is. So I think I've always been able to network quickly and bring a lot of expertise to bear. That would be number two. And then I think, look, you've got to be interested in continuous improvement, and you have to be both confident in it and humbled by it. So what does the data say? A lot of times I've had these great ideas and I've shopped them to students or educators or principals or nonprofit leaders, and they've said, Bryan, I got to be honest with you, like, we like two or three of these, but you're missing this over here. And so do you have the humility to really listen to that data, to explore further more learning, more networking around people who may be working on the same thing, and really bringing to bear those three skill sets when you are attacking any problem or challenge?
Fantastic. So if we could distill that into even a few words, it sounds like you need to work hard, right? You need to have an open mind and ask for feedback, right? And as long as you're willing to commit to those three things, you can grow into anything that you're in pursuit of. About anything, it seems. So, Bryan, you shared a remarkable story when we were chatting the other day about scaling North Carolina virtual from 13 teachers and 1,000 students to 1,300 teachers and 50,000 students annually.
Yep.
What do you think was the most impactful turning point or strategic lesson or pivot you made during that period to allow for such exponential growth?
I think change leadership. At that time, virtual learning had a lot of assumptions about it. Would it replace educators? Is the quality online the same as face to face? And I'm a big Joseph Grenny disciple. I don't believe in the tyranny of either or. I believe in the genius of both and. So when I look at challenges or opportunities to scale, we might have had 1,000 students in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, a large urban city in North Carolina, who were using several of our services, but then we might walk over to a small rural county and they didn't know that we offered physics or AP chemistry or Spanish. So with most things, can you relate to people? Can you explain the value? And then can you show them what's happening to change the odds for students in their community? Once people started hearing that story and we started evangelizing it, then we have to deliver. That experience also has to be good. And once they experience it, now they become the marketers and the evangelists because they can go out to their community and say, hey, we may live in a small rural county in North Carolina, but you can get certifications, credentials, you can get early college classes, and that really starts to motivate families, individuals, and communities to change.
Wow. So, with that in mind, I'm kind of curious, was that maybe that most impactful moment or occurrence experience that opened your eyes, or was there any other truly noticeable and memorable pivot that, from which you learned, which reshaped your ability to approach what you're doing today?
Yeah, I think, the author escapes me, but I read a book a while back about an admiral who had the worst ship in the Navy 18 months before and then created the best ship. And it was based on three questions. What's working, what's not, and what can I do in the next 90 days to change your life? Well, if you approach any idea, any program, any product, what are we sensing that's going well? Build on strengths. People generate some of the best work when they look at, this is what works. We've seen the evidence. And then with the challenges, that's going to be fraught in every endeavor. So if you can minimize those by talking about the big things that need to change in the next 90 days, you give people hope, you give them momentum, you give them early results. So I hear a lot of leaders talking about a listening tour. I hear a lot of startup entrepreneurs talking about, we did our due diligence and asked potential customers or prospective customers. I think all of that's great, but you've got to put that in a framework where it's continual. I'm a big PDSA disciple. What's the plan? What are we going to do? What happened? And how are we going to act on those changes? And if you treat any organization like 90 days to accomplish those milestones, you're going to be successful no matter where you go. So I did that work early at North Carolina Virtual. It was constant, it was iterative, and we were constantly refining the work. That's a recipe for any founder's success.
Yeah, it sounds like you almost were able to bring a formula to success by constantly innovating, reiterating, and making sure that you were making forward momentum with the top priorities and goals in mind. I find it can be very easy these days to get sidelined or distracted. There's a lot of shiny objects out there, AI being one of them, which we'll talk about later. But it sounds like you really created a great framework to help you scale North Carolina virtual. I'm curious to learn a little bit more about what you're doing today with the Setser group, with these frameworks and lessons that you've learned in the past. Tell us a little bit more about who it is you're working with and what it is you're doing at Setser Group.
When I left North Carolina Virtual, I had the opportunity to work at Two Revolutions and RPK Group. They were very large consulting firms. They cut across K-12, higher ed, workforce. And around 45, which is a little late, I know, for entrepreneurs, but I changed all my passwords to CEO by 50. And so every time I would wake up, I would say, you've been a CEO, you've been a partner in these large consulting firms, but there's something else you're destined to lead. You're destined to scale the next project, the next endeavor. So I had learned, not only at North Carolina Virtual, but at 2Rev and RPK, how you could truly build a firm of wayfinders. I was super interested in finding other people like me at the full-time level, the contract level, the signature partner level, and what would be the profile of those wayfinders under a group I might create. So I decided in 2020 that I would take my time with this. I had an equity payout. I thought that I had a year. Turns out I had 2 months. And when the pandemic hit in 2020, it turns out if you're a global expert and have 10,000 hours in digital transformation, you become very interesting to people. So I had 3 types of clients. I had people that had never had to lead organizations, build products or programs virtually. Then I had a second group who had done that work, but were now looking to modify their models because of the new climate and the new circumstances. And then I had the people I love, the early adopters, the innovators who were like, finally, we have a context to really blow up the system. So we were able to get with, nonprofits, for-profits, K-12 school districts, universities, all were grappling with the question of, how do I meet this moment and create something new? And that's been our work at Setser Group for the last 5.5 years.
Very cool. So it sounds like you're taking your Wayfinder ways and now bringing them to your clients to allow them to also, as a byproduct, become a Wayfinder.
Yes.
In their own right. Very neat.
Yeah.
Do you have any specific stories that you could share with us about any individual clients that come to mind of, how it is you were able to have the greatest impact or who you had the greatest impact with as a result?
Yeah, we have a few. We had a relationship through some of my past networks with the chancellor at Winston-Salem State, an HBCU here in North Carolina. And he gave me a call and he said, Bryan, everybody's worried about safety and we will cover that and we will make sure that our campus is safe. But I want you to lead something called Project Phoenix. I want to come out of this better, stronger. I want to offer different things. How would you think about using this moment to do that? So I convened cross-functional partners, staff members, students into a Project Phoenix sprint for about 6 months. And we came up with 3 very unique concepts. We wanted to establish the first HBCU fund to fund Black excellence and brilliance. We wanted to establish a network that was like the Black LinkedIn, where Black mentors, brown mentors could push in and help people do startups and launch new products and programs. And then finally, we wanted an innovation lab that was different than the incubators and some of the accelerators you've seen, that was more based on employer partnerships. So we did that work for about a year, and the chancellor called me and he said, hey man, out of the blue, Mackenzie Scott has given us $30 million unrestricted. That certainly should change our design, shouldn't it? And I said, yes, sir, we will get right on that. So we began to look at how those 3 ideas could manifest in acquiring more flexible properties, building the footprint out for the university, scholarshiping students for economic and social mobility and entrepreneurial activities, and also tying that back to the network and the lab. To this day, they're still doing amazing innovation work. They're still funding those economic opportunities for students and expanding their campus. We were with them about 3 years and we remain, a trusted partner in their work. So that would be one example of serendipity meeting opportunity, but also guiding them through best-in-class practice. And whether you're talking about the Black Ivies and looking at Howard or Morehouse, or whether you're talking about places like Notre Dame or Cal Berkeley, who have developed a fund to launch their entrepreneurs and how that works. It had not been done in the HBCU space in that manner, in that fashion. So we've had a lot of copycats in that sense and people, trying to launch their own entrepreneurial efforts. I think certainly SparkNC, a similar effort at Setser Group, where I got a call from a wonderful executive director, Joe Obladinger. He said, "Hey, Bryan, the legislature just gave us $8 million. We're charged with creating credential-rich pathways for students in high school and high-need fields and high-need demand areas like AI or cybersecurity. How do we do that?" So I got with Joe very early. I looked at other cohort models across the world and the nation. And to date, that project 3 years later is in 18 school districts, serving hundreds of students, getting them ready for cyber careers, AI experiences, etc. It has employer partnerships with folks like Epic Games, and people are learning how to code. They're translating those skills to what they'll do with college and career. There's a Spark Lab in all of those districts, and they're also on the legislative agenda to look at next-gen school models and career and technical education outcomes. We were the CTO as a service through all of that. We helped them build with Area 9 out of Denmark, a really unique platform that allows students to experience these early career skills and then to leverage them into outcomes for their career.
Wow. And both of these clients came from a phone call. It sounds like you've made
Yeah.
some pretty good relationships along the way.
Yeah, for better or worse, I'm who you call on the front end. It either hasn't been done or people have the genesis of an idea, but they may not have access to capital or they may not have the ability to take that idea and bring it to scale. And so we get involved in a lot of those conversations. I believe in the divine rule of three, so I'll give you one more example of one that, didn't come from a phone call or wasn't part of that trajectory. But we often work in terms of people that are trying to build things or design things. And so, we've worked with national nonprofits like New Tech Network or Build. We've been involved in things with like Rutgers University and scaling their IT initiatives. People sometimes have never launched an enterprise effort or they've never done that across the board. So I've been privileged to be in several things over the past year. And one of the things that I'm probably most excited about headed into this year is our AI work, because we're serving as an AI coach in residence for South Carolina Teacher and Carolina Cred and the University of South Carolina. So we're working with their C teams to talk about how to build AI competencies in the jobs to be done that they do for educators, for communities, for districts. And so that notion that you may not need to hire somebody, you may need to bring me or my network of Wayfinders to serve as that interim innovation talent to really help you get to the next place. That's really exciting.
Oh, it sounds exciting. I mean, Bryan, you've got an incredible track record. You're making some incredible impact. Obviously, that was known from the very start when we were talking about North Carolina virtual. But I'm curious here, with Setser Group, with what you're working on, the impact and the reach that you can have is so great. I mean, are you currently working on scaling, or do you typically only work with a few clients at a time?
Yeah, great question. I think the president of the Hair Club for Men probably needs to use the same approach for how he tends to his house or his own work. I say that in jest because, I've been able to scale Setser Group over 5.5 years as a service organization. We are in 3 different Productize conversations that would really take this wayfinding to the next place. So one of the things that we did early was get access to the GPTs. And so we built a GPT that was basically, what would Bryan do? We uploaded all my blogs, we uploaded all my video transcripts, a lot of our Dropbox and Google IP, and we started fashioning rules around it, like if you are asked to come into an advisory situation, how do you leverage benchmarking? How do you leverage AI? How do you use some of our previous framing decks or frameworks that we've brought into play to make that happen? So, not surprising to you, we'd love to call that product Wayfinder, and we've been playing in various instances around it so that leaders who are younger, startup founders, can have our unique approach as their Sherpa through their own startup journeys, the way they might go about pitching to boards or clients or prospective funders, the way they need support reports around building teams or organizations. So we just launched this past week on Substack trial balloon, build an organization ready for any future. And it's a 6-module course that, we would roll into sort of these Wayfinder dynamics. So I do think we're at the end of like micro credentials and courses scaling. I think where we want to be is behind the firewall and the big four AIs where, hey, this is a proprietary solution with Setser Group and Wayfinder that really can build you a cadre of Wayfinders in your organization. And you don't need 10 years sitting behind somebody or 20 years. We're going to equip you with skills to build a team, a leader, an org ready for any future.
Wow, that's incredible. So you're taking your frameworks and your lessons, everything you've learned, and you're starting to productize them, right? Now, making that shift from a service base to a product base, I mean, if you have a little bit of, if there's maybe a good amount of nepotism, you could find yourself in a position where you can work through current relationships and you can bring the product to market in a pretty big way. But then there's that jump of going from the warm relationships and to bring it to the market as well and breaking through the noise for things that might look similar, even if they're not. Do you have some sort of a systematic approach or a way that you're planning on bringing this to market to really help it get out there on scale?
Well, yes. And I mean, I think that when we saw the agent strategy emerging in the GPTs and you could click on it and give it access to your own personal IP, my reaction was no. Because you've built up a methodology, you've built up a set of standard operating procedures, you have some things that are really unique to how you create outcomes. I mean, I consider myself, someone who is influenced by multiple leadership, design, edu-business things that because of my career arc, I've had the opportunity to experience and others have not. Now, I look for Wayfinders who are also deep in those areas. I'll give you an example. Lots of people think that they know finance or what a CFO does. I'm more interested in the strategic finance folks who are nimble and can build like short-term pro formas versus actuals. They can run model scenarios. That was all built out of being influenced by the lean business model canvas and how we think about how we bring people to market quickly. So what we're struggling with right now is, what are the big four going to do in AI? Are they going to cannibalize the digital platform space and the digital market? Are we going to find ourselves selling into them almost like Spotify? And so I've been in a bimodal journey on the go-to-market strategy between finding something that they don't uniquely do and applying that to what Setser could do in a general format, or two exciting projects I'd like to share where we're helping the Massachusetts Continuing Legal Education Association beat the bias issues around using AI falsely and creating a bot called Second Chair, which would act as another legal team member, but draw down from Westlaw and proprietary legal information. So that's an example of where I think the future is going to belong to organizations that can drift off of the AI infrastructure, but not necessarily line up behind the big four. So with every digital transformation that I've ever been in, there's always fear, there's always job shifts, but then there's a lot of work to be done off of what happens next. And we're really trying to skate to that puck of, do we want it to be our personal proprietary scaling prototype, or do we want to create something that would work for multiple businesses with their own IP?
With all of this as well, I feel like I'm picking something out here in terms of, the approach that you are taking and how you're thinking about building out these tools or these systems, these agents. I mean, it sounds like you're really viewing AI as a little bit more of like a synergistic teammate rather than a tool, right? You're not necessarily, it sounds like you're not necessarily trying to remove humans from an organization, but give them, better accessibility and, more tools in their belt. How did this philosophy come about? I mean, a lot of people are looking at AI thinking, it's going to save me money, it's going to replace my employees. Why do you think it's more favorable to view it as a teammate rather than a substitution?
Pre-AI, I was impressed by the technology we have in our pockets, that smartphones organized well, curated well, could amplify my human talent. It could give me superpowers if I knew how to leverage it. So for example, If you have a health app on your phone, that's a core part of you having the energy to do what you need to do. It also is an accountability partner. If you have apps on your phone that allow you to monitor workflows, I mean, I was a early power user of Slack, an early power user of Discord. Like, I understand how distributed networks make me smarter and more ready faster. So when AI came along, I too saw it as a teammate, and I saw it as an integrated strategy into expanding the work that we would do. So I'll give you a couple quick examples. I don't let people pick my brain. I ask my team, have you run an AI scenario? Because you're bringing something to me that if we can bake it out at 40% or 50%, now we can keep the human in the loop and collaborate in some really meaningful ways. So we do a lot of work around, act as a market researcher, prepare me a slate in a table of 10 competitors who are doing XYZ. What are their results? But you've had the experience of AI hallucinations, as have I. So then what you do is you actually call those people and you keep a human in the loop and you say, hey, is this vaporware? Did this really happen? Do you have any updated metrics on what you're doing? Now you're starting to partner humans and AI in the right way. So I think this is only going to get stronger. I think the stuff we're seeing around the meta glasses or the stuff we're seeing around, how wearables will come into play here, it is very minority report, but I would make a slight edit. Kahneman talks about thinking slow and thinking fast. If the meta layer of these glasses can now generate content, what I do with permissioning, what I do with the ability to turn them on and off really matters, because I can get smart from a procedural level very quickly on AI, but in a conceptual and application sense, I need the ability to think slow. So we're going to have to teach young people, different generations, how to utilize AI as a teammate to make their life automated, but also to how to enrich it when you're really looking for solutions that you otherwise might not consider.
Sounds like we're going to have to teach the younger generation how to think for themselves again, but I feel like that's probably always been a challenge, hasn't it? So, Bryan, given your experience with digital transformation and your business intelligence, how do you see AI fundamentally reshaping the business landscape for consultants and coaches in the next maybe 3 to 5 years? I know it's impossible to know where we're going to be in 3 to 5 years with AI, but where do you feel it's really going to start reshaping the landscape?
I think pre-AI a couple of years ago, you would have a lot of titles like researcher, analyst. Somebody would be on staff to manage a project or have a community engagement strategy. I think those entry-level jobs and those mid-level jobs will be reshaped by the power of AI. And so it will create a gap where when you're teaching young people now how to leverage AI, I just did a talk on this for our school district pro bono where I talked about, I don't need you to debate whether students are writing their paper with AI. I need you to create rubrics and outcomes where the students can show you what parts were uniquely human and what parts they leveraged AI in. I just saw this from a peer that I executive coach. He's applying for a job, and the last question of the job was, did you use AI in this application? First time I'd seen that. So he asked me as his executive coach, like, what should I say? And I'm like, hell yeah, you used it, and explain how you did it. And he goes, what do you mean? I'm like, tell them that you took the description, you took your resume, and you mashed up a cover letter. Explain to them that in doing so, you went back and researched their website, you made corrections, you put it in your voice. Explain how you leveraged it, because that's what they're going to want you to do when you're working on content and IP together. And if they don't get that, that's not the place for you, because that's where we're headed.
That's very insightful. I think a lot of employers are almost looking at it in a negative light, or at least they have been for the first couple of years. Oh, you're using AI, you're lazy, you're taking shortcuts. This isn't actually you, you're not being truthful. But there's a lot of intelligence and a lot of really great things that come out of people that maybe they can't really articulate as well in a resume or in a cover letter. These aren't things that we do every day. So how can you really judge someone based off of a cover letter unless you know that it's always being done to the highest degree? And if you're using AI and everyone's using AI, I think that'd be a pretty quick equalizer, as long as it's being done well, properly, and in the right way, we could say.
Yeah, I think I always make it personal with my own kids. I have 4, but I have 2 that are still in school at 15 and 12, and they ask me a lot about what's going on with it, what are you doing, et cetera. And I get upset at them on their amount of time they spend doom scrolling around things that are not creating value. So I said to my 12-year-old recently, I'm like, you've shown me at least 10 kids that are making an impact socially or creating revenue while in middle and high school. I don't want to look at another one of your reels until you show me how you're doing that. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, you have opportunities that we never had. Not only do you have more power with the smartphone, people are creating AI enabled businesses on it with the free versions. So spend some time when you make a choice around a school project or you make a choice around who you want to influence or impact in the world, utilizing this amazing tool, because at every level of your learning, that's going to be of value for you and for the people you want to work with.
Bryan, question for you here. I mean, it's all been questions for you, but what's one piece of advice that you'd offer to business leaders who are still trying to understand how to best integrate AI into their organizational workflows and culture?
Clayton Christensen wrote a book about the innovator's dilemma, and he wrote several series at Harvard about the jobs to be done. When I'm advising startup founders, I remind them of his milkshakes story where, he had someone go observe at McDonald's why people were ordering milkshakes above every other product. And when you follow that story, these were mostly men. It was mostly midnight to 9 a.m. in the morning. They needed a portable, sort of energy ready drink that they could concentrate on driving. He was solving the problem they were trying to solve and the aspirations that they had. Now, what a lot of people don't know is everything McDonald's created after that could fit in a coaster, because the job to be done was the food portable? Was it, something you could value in that way? So I think getting insatiably curious is always my playbook around why is this happening? What are we learning from it? How can we equip you with a way to network with others, understand it more? And then how do we teach you how to execute with these tools that are often fundamentals? But this is something I really want to point out, David. They're not being taught anymore. So when I meet you in person, it's a handshake, it's a look in the eye, it's a connection. I'm an energy lifter. When most young people meet you in person, they have trouble looking away from their phone. They have trouble forming a coherent pitch, even if that pitch is a personal one about why you two have something in common or you connect. So I think there's a really big opportunity for people that can teach the fundamentals. In fact, we've been playing with, another thing we're working on that's not Wayfinder, but it's just the fundamentals. Like, we don't think leaders today that have been raised in the anxious generation, that are coming out in their 20s or 30s, have gone through some fundamentals that us old heads take for granted. And some of it's about, warm experiences, giving people beyond what they expect, making sure that, they meet deadlines and that they also understand how to talk frankly to people if those deadlines aren't sustainable or they impact both of their lives. So we're really trying to balance that wisdom, much like the Wayfinder. I mean, the Wayfinder has origins in the Sherpa on Everest, and Sherpas don't go 10,000 miles an hour and try to do it all in one day. They know where the challenges are. They know how to be healthy around it. We're trying to do that for young people.
Bryan, I want to thank you so much for sharing your insights, your lessons, and your thoughts with the audience today on the growth shift. For any of our audience who might like to reach out to connect with you directly, or maybe even just learn more about what you're doing, what would be the best way to find you online?
You bet. So you can find us at setsergroup.com. We also, at the top of that website, have a Substack newsletter called Wayfinder, and we publish that weekly. And then certainly, feel free to email me directly. I will tell you up front that I even leverage AI there to manage my schedule and responses, and then figure out a way for us to connect based on the content of that. And I'm also pretty accessible to, joining a podcast like today, or, having a think tank through a lunch and learn. Those are all ways to meet people, and certainly open to being contacted that way.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap on another episode of The Growth Shift. If this conversation sparked something for you, whether it's a new perspective on failure, a strategy you want to try, or just the reminder that every setback can become a setup for something bigger, hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, the leaders who thrive aren't the ones who avoid change. They're the ones who shift strategically through it. If you're ready to build the systems that help you grow without the chaos, head over to valentix.io. We help businesses like yours scale smarter, not harder. I'm David Zylstra, and I'll see you in the next shift.